The first scream cut through the terminal like broken glass. "Sir, step away from the counter, now!" Heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. The sound of rolling suitcases slowed, then stopped. At gate C-17 of Logan Airport, a uniformed security supervisor stood rigid, one hand hovering near his radio, eyes locked on a man who looked like he did not belong in any argument at all. The man was standing perfectly still. He was in his early 60s, maybe mid-60s, silver threaded through close-cropped hair, posture straight but not stiff. He wore a faded navy windbreaker, dark slacks, sensible leather shoes that had been polished more out of habit than vanity. No raised voice, no sudden movement, just one hand resting lightly on the handle of an old canvas briefcase, the other holding a boarding pass that had already been scanned once. People assumed guilt because silence unnerved them. The supervisor's jaw tightened. "You were told to wait." "You don't get to decide when this line moves." The man looked at him calmly, not defiant, not afraid, just observant, like someone taking notes without writing anything down. "I didn't move," he said. His voice was low, steady, weathered by years of measured conversations. "You did." That should have ended it. Instead, it sharpened everything. Behind the counter, the gate agent, a woman in her early 40s named Karen Whitfield, swallowed hard. Her fingers trembled against the keyboard. She had made a judgment 2 minutes earlier. A small one, she thought, a harmless one. She had flagged his ticket for manual verification, even though the system showed green, even though the boarding group was already called, even though there were other passengers waiting who had not been flagged. She told herself it was procedure. She had told herself that many times in her career. Now the entire gate was watching. "Sir," Karen said, her voice thin but firm, "there's a discrepancy with your reservation. Until we clear it, you'll need to step aside." The man didn't argue. He didn't sigh. He glanced at the departure board overhead. Flight 287 to San Diego. On time. He had arrived early on purpose. Always did. He believed rushing made people sloppy. "I've flown this route for 30 years, he said quietly. "This is the first time my name has caused a discrepancy." Karen flinched. She didn't answer that. A younger man in a tailored blazer shifted behind him, irritation leaking through his expression. "Can we move this along?" he muttered. "Some of us have meetings." The older man turned his head slightly. His eyes met the younger man's. Not hostile, not apologetic, simply present. "So do I." The security supervisor stepped closer. He smelled faintly of aftershave and coffee. Authority radiated from him in practiced gestures. "Last warning. Step back or I escort you out." That word hung in the air. Escort. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A woman with white hair and a Red Sox scarf pressed her lips together. A retired postal worker, by the looks of him, shook his head slowly. They had seen this shape of moment before. Not the details, the shape. The man finally moved. One step, just enough to square himself with the supervisor. He did not raise his hands. He did not lower his eyes. "You're escalating a problem you created," he said, "and you're doing it loudly." Karen's breath hitched. Her screen pinged softly. The reservation had reloaded. Everything still green. She stared at it, then at the man, then back at the screen, as if willing it to contradict her. "Sir," she said again, faster now, "what is the purpose of your travel?" That question changed the air. It was not standard. Everyone knew it. The man studied her face, saw the fear beneath the professionalism, saw the calculation. He answered anyway. "I'm going to San Diego to close a plant." A beat. Then confusion. The younger man scoffed under his breath. Someone else let out a short, humorless laugh. Karen straightened. "Close a plant," she repeated. As in 300 jobs, he said. As in a facility that's been violating federal safety codes for over a decade. As in a decision that should have been made years ago. The supervisor blinked. Just once. His hand dropped from his radio. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. Her screen chimed again, this time with a new notification. She didn't recognize the code, but the color was unmistakable. Red. Deep red. She leaned closer. Her face drained. The man watched her reaction with quiet focus. He did not enjoy this. He had hoped, foolishly, that anonymity would hold a little longer. "You might want to read the internal note," he said. "All of it." Karen's fingers hovered, then typed. Her breathing grew shallow. The words on the screen rearranged her understanding of the last 5 minutes. The supervisor leaned in. "What is it?" She didn't answer him. She looked up at the man instead. Her voice came out softer, smaller. "Your name isn't just flagged," she said. "It's protected." Silence. Thick. Heavy. The older woman in the scarf felt her pulse quicken. She sensed a turn before it arrived. She had lived long enough to recognize the sound of power shifting without noise. The man reached into his jacket slowly, not theatrically, deliberately. He pulled out a slim leather wallet, worn at the edges, and opened it just enough for Karen to see. He didn't shove it forward, didn't announce anything. Her eyes widened. She inhaled sharply, as if the air had suddenly thinned. The supervisor stepped back instinctively. "What is that?" The man closed the wallet, returned it to his jacket. He looked around the gate, at the people watching, at the systems humming above them, at the small assumptions that had piled up into something dangerous. "My name is Daniel Mercer," he said. "I'm the acting chief executive of North Shore Industrial Group. I took this flight instead of the company jet because I wanted to see how my people are treated when no one knows who they are." Karen's knees nearly gave out. North Shore. The name hit the terminal like a dropped weight. A conglomerate. Energy. Manufacturing. Logistics. Tens of thousands employed. Billions in contracts. The plant in San Diego had been on the news. Whistleblowers. Injuries. Quiet settlements. The supervisor swallowed. "Sir, I had no idea." Daniel Mercer nodded once. "That's the point." No one spoke. Not because they were afraid, because they were recalibrating. The world had just shifted a few inches, and for people who had spent decades watching institutions fail and succeed, those inches mattered. Karen's voice shook. "We can board you immediately. We can offer—" Daniel raised a hand. She stopped. "I don't need an apology," he said. "I need a record. I need the names of everyone who thought inconvenience was a reason to forget dignity. And I need you to remember this moment, the next time someone stands in front of you quietly." The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Group 1, now boarding. Daniel picked up his briefcase. The canvas handle was worn smooth by time. He walked past the counter, past the supervisor, past the stairs. He did not look back. Behind him, the older woman in the scarf let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She felt something rare stir in her chest. Not triumph. Recognition. The camera would have followed Daniel down the jet bridge. The steady pace, the controlled breathing, the weight of what he was about to do settling into place. But the real story stayed behind, at the gate, where people were learning that power does not always announce itself, and that the most dangerous mistake is believing you know who matters at first glance. The jet bridge hummed under Daniel Mercer's footsteps, a low mechanical vibration that traveled up through the soles of his shoes and into his knees. He walked with the same measured pace he had used for decades in boardrooms and factory floors, but his pulse was louder now, a steady drumbeat reminding him that observation had a cost. Behind him, the gate door sealed shut with a final metallic click, and the murmurs of the terminal were cut off as cleanly as a switched channel. Inside the aircraft, the air was cooler, conditioned to a neutral that never quite pleased anyone. A flight attendant with tired eyes and a practiced smile glanced at his boarding pass, then at his face. Recognition flickered for a fraction of a second, not because she knew who he was, but because she sensed the residue of something that had already happened. She nodded and gestured down the aisle without a word. Daniel took his seat near the front. Window, always window. He set the canvas briefcase under the seat in front of him and rested his hands on his thighs. The cabin filled slowly. Voices, laughter, the familiar choreography of people settling into places they believed were temporary. He watched reflections move across the oval window, distorted faces sliding by like passing thoughts. Across the aisle, a man in his late 50s adjusted his cufflinks with sharp, irritated movements. He wore a suit that had been tailored aggressively, as if the fabric itself were meant to dominate the space. He kept glancing toward Daniel, not openly, but often enough to register. When their eyes met briefly, the man looked away first. The captain's voice came over the intercom, warm and rehearsed, welcoming everyone aboard and listing flight time and weather in San Diego. Clear skies, mild crosswinds. Routine. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment and pictured the plant, the cracked concrete, the safety logs rewritten too many times. The manager who smiled while lying, the worker who had lost 2 fingers and been thanked with a settlement check and a quiet warning. The plane began to taxi, a subtle shift, forward motion without lift. Daniel felt it in his chest, the familiar anticipation that came with moments when decisions could no longer be delayed. A voice leaned toward him from across the aisle. "Rough morning at the gate," the man in the suit said lightly, as if testing the water. "They always seem understaffed lately." Daniel opened his eyes, turned his head just enough to acknowledge him. "They seem trained to look for the wrong problems," he replied. The man laughed, a short bark that carried more relief than humor. "That's one way to put it." He hesitated. "The name's Victor Hale." Daniel nodded. "Daniel." Victor glanced at the briefcase, then back at Daniel's face. "Consulting?" he asked, the word loaded with assumptions. "Something like that," Daniel said. The plane paused at the runway. Engines spooled. The sound rose, pressing against the cabin walls. Victor leaned back, conversation temporarily suspended by physics. Acceleration pushed Daniel into the seat, a reminder that even massive systems obeyed simple rules when enough force was applied. Once airborne, the cabin relaxed. Seatbelt signs clicked off. The murmur returned. Victor turned again, curiosity sharpened now by momentum. "San Diego's changing," he said. "A lot of old operations getting shut down. People don't like it." Daniel watched the wings slice through thin cloud. "People rarely do," he said, "especially when they've been told nothing is wrong." Victor smirked. "Sounds like you're on the other side of that argument." Daniel met his gaze fully this time. "There are sides," he said, "and then there are consequences." The flight attendant passed, offering drinks. Victor ordered bourbon. Daniel asked for water, no ice. The attendant paused, studying Daniel's face with a flicker of something unreadable, then moved on. As the plane leveled off, Daniel reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thin folder. No logos, no labels, just paper. He did not open it yet. He felt the weight of it like a living thing. Victor took a sip of bourbon, then gestured toward the folder. Serious reading for a short flight. Daniel smiled faintly. Some things don't get lighter just because you're closer to them. Victor chuckled, but his eyes narrowed. You sound like a man who's about to ruin someone's week. Daniel considered that. Or save someone's life. The humor drained from Victor's face. He shifted in his seat. You know, he said after a beat, I sit on a few boards. Energy, manufacturing, the works. There's a lot of noise these days. Regulators, activists. They don't understand what it takes to keep the lights on. Daniel opened the folder. The paper inside rustled softly. They understand injury reports, he said, and funerals. Victor stared at him. The cabin seemed to contract around them, the background noise dulling as if someone had turned a dial. You one of those watchdog types? Victor asked carefully. Daniel looked up. His eyes were calm, focused. I'm the one who signs the final order. Victor laughed reflexively, then stopped when Daniel didn't join him. The silence stretched. Victor's throat worked as he swallowed. You're serious? Daniel closed the folder. I am. Across the aisle, a woman in her early 70s had been pretending to read a magazine. She lowered it slightly, eyes sharp, taking in the tension. She had seen men like Victor before. She had also seen men like Daniel, though rarely, and never up close. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the electric awareness that something honest was happening in a world that preferred soft lies. The flight attendant returned with Daniel's water. She placed it carefully on the tray. Her voice dropped. Sir, she said, I wanted to apologize for earlier. Daniel looked at her. Really looked. He saw the fatigue, the pressure, the fear of making the wrong call and paying for it alone. Apologies matter, he said, but patterns matter more. She nodded, eyes moist, and moved on. Victor leaned back, running a hand through his hair. You can't just shut places down, he said, a note of desperation creeping in. There are chains, dependencies. Daniel folded his hands. I know, he said. That's why I didn't do it from an office. The plane hit light turbulence. A few gasps. The seatbelt sign chimed. Daniel felt the brief drop in his stomach and welcomed it. Gravity was honest. As they descended toward San Diego, the city spread out below, a grid of sunlight and shadow. Daniel felt the familiar narrowing of focus. The moment before impact, metaphorical or otherwise, always felt like this. Clear, quiet. Victor said nothing more. He stared straight ahead, bourbon untouched, his reflection pale in the window. When the wheels hit the runway, the sound was decisive. Final. Daniel exhaled slowly. He gathered his briefcase and stood when the aisle cleared. The older woman across the way caught his eye as she rose. She gave him a small nod. Respect, not curiosity. He returned it. As Daniel stepped into the jet bridge, his phone vibrated. A single message from his general counsel. All documents ready. Media standing by. Worker representatives notified. Daniel typed back one word. Proceed. He slipped the phone into his pocket and walked forward, the hum of the bridge rising to meet him. The building ahead waited, unaware that its future had already been decided by a man who had chosen to be underestimated for just long enough. The heat hit first, dry and unforgiving, the kind that pressed against the lungs instead of wrapping around the body. Daniel Mercer stepped out of the terminal and into the glare of San Diego afternoon light, the concrete shimmering like a sheet of dull metal. The air smelled faintly of salt, fuel, and something burned long ago. He paused, just long enough to orient himself, then kept walking. A black sedan waited at the curb, engine running, windows tinted, no logo, no driver standing outside holding a sign. The rear door opened smoothly as he approached. Mr. Mercer, the driver said, his voice low, respectful, not eager. Traffic's light. We'll be at the facility in 20 minutes. Daniel nodded and slid into the back seat. The door closed with a muted thud, sealing out the noise of the airport. As the car pulled away, the terminal receded in the side mirror, shrinking into something already past. He loosened his collar slightly, not because he was uncomfortable, but because the next few hours would demand oxygen. The phone in his pocket vibrated again. Another message. This one from operations. Local management notified. Security heightened. No incidents reported yet. Yet was the operative word. The sedan merged onto the freeway. Sunlight flickered through overpasses, strobing across Daniel's face. Each flash brought back fragments of memory. Other cities, other plants. The first one he had closed decades ago, when he was still learning the weight of signatures. The protests, the letters. The nights staring at ceilings, wondering if doing the right thing would ever stop feeling like a loss. The driver glanced at him in the mirror. "They're nervous," he said carefully. "The local director's been calling every 10 minutes. Daniel leaned back. "Good," he said. "It means they understand time is up." The sedan exited the freeway and cut through an industrial district that had not kept pace with the skyline downtown. Warehouses with peeling paint, chain-link fences bowed with age. A mural, half-faded on a brick wall, showed a smiling worker in a hard hat, a slogan beneath him promising safety and pride. Daniel looked at it longer than necessary. The car slowed, turned, then stopped. The facility rose ahead, squat and sprawling, concrete stained dark by years of neglect. Trucks idled near the loading bays, their engines rattling unevenly. A small cluster of workers stood near the entrance, smoking, watching. Word traveled faster than official notices ever could. Daniel stepped out of the car. The heat wrapped around him immediately. Sweat prickled at the base of his neck. He adjusted his jacket and walked toward the doors. Inside, the air was thick, not hot, heavy. The hum of machinery pressed against the walls, a constant reminder that this place had never truly slept. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly pallor on everything below. A man hurried toward him, hand extended before his face fully registered. "Daniel," he said, too brightly. "I'm Mark Feldman, Regional Operations Director. We weren't expecting you until—" Daniel shook his hand once, firm, brief. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here." Mark's smile faltered. He gestured down the corridor. "We've prepared a conference room. We can go over the reports, address any concerns." Daniel looked past him, down the corridor, toward the production floor. The noise grew louder there, rhythmic, relentless. "Later," Daniel said. "I want to see it first." Mark hesitated, just a fraction of a second. Enough. "Of course," he said, turning. "Right this way." They walked. The floor vibrated underfoot. Workers glanced up as they passed, eyes flicking to Daniel's face, then away. Some curious, some wary, some already resigned. Daniel met each look evenly. He did not rush, did not slow. A young woman stood near one of the machines, her arm wrapped in a fresh bandage. She froze when she saw them. Mark opened his mouth, then closed it. Daniel stopped. "What happened?" he asked her. She looked at Mark, then back at Daniel. Her voice was quiet. "Caught it on the press," she said. "Safety guard jammed." "How long ago?" Daniel asked. "Last week." Mark cleared his throat. "It was a minor incident," he said quickly. "Reported. Addressed." Daniel turned to him. His gaze was level. "Addressed how?" Mark's eyes darted. "We issued a memo. Maintenance is scheduled." Daniel looked back at the woman. "Are you back on full duty?" She shook her head. "Light work, for now." Daniel nodded once. "Thank you," he said to her. Then he turned and continued walking. The conference room was small, windowless, too clean compared to the rest of the facility. Bottled water arranged neatly on the table, a projector humming softly. Mark launched into his presentation almost immediately. Charts, percentages, words like compliance and mitigation. Daniel listened without interruption, his face unreadable. The numbers slid past him. He had memorized them on the flight. When Mark finished, breathless, Daniel waited. Let the silence stretch. Let it do its work. "You've been falsifying reports," Daniel said calmly. Mark laughed, sharp and defensive. "That's a serious accusation." "So is a falsified safety log," Daniel replied. "So is instructing supervisors to delay maintenance until after inspections. So is encouraging injured workers to classify incidents as personal negligence." Mark's color drained. "You don't understand the pressure we're under," he said. "Margins are tight." "Corporate expectations," Daniel leaned forward. "Just slightly. Corporate expectations are why I'm here," he said. "And they end today." Mark pushed back from the table. "You can't just shut us down," he said, panic breaking through. "There are contracts, deadlines." Daniel stood. The room seemed smaller with him on his feet. "The order's already signed," he said. "Effective immediately. Operations cease by end of day." Mark stared at him. "You're destroying this place." Daniel's voice did not rise. "No," he said. "I'm stopping it from destroying more people." Outside, a siren wailed briefly, then faded. The machinery on the floor continued its relentless rhythm, unaware. Daniel picked up his briefcase. "There will be a formal statement in 1 hour," he said. "Worker compensation packages are already approved. Inspectors are en route." Mark sank back into his chair. The fight drained out of him, leaving only the hollow echo of consequences. Daniel walked out. The corridor felt longer on the way back. He passed the woman with the bandaged arm again. She looked up. Their eyes met. He gave her a small nod. She returned it, something like relief flickering across her face. Outside, the heat had softened. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the cracked concrete. Workers gathered now, murmurs rising, questions forming. Daniel stopped at the edge of the crowd. He did not shout. He did not grandstand. "This facility is closing," he said, his voice carrying without effort. "Not because of profit, because of safety. You deserve better than what you've been given." Silence followed. Then a ripple. Anger, fear, gratitude, all at once. As Daniel turned back toward the waiting sedan, he felt the familiar weight settle on his shoulders. Heavy. Necessary. The driver opened the door. Daniel stepped inside. The building behind him continued to hum for a few more minutes. Then, one by one, the machines went quiet. The silence after the machines stopped was not peaceful. It rang in the ears, a hollow absence where noise had lived for decades. Daniel Mercer felt it before he heard it, a pressure change in the chest, like the moment after a door slams and the air hasn't settled yet. The workers stood scattered across the yard, some staring at the building as if it might restart out of sheer habit, others already dialing phones, voices low and urgent. Daniel did not leave immediately. He stood near the sedan, hands at his sides, watching the human aftermath unfold. Anger moved first. It always did. A man in a grease-stained jacket kicked a loose stone across the pavement. Another ripped off his gloves and flung them into the bed of a truck. But beneath that, Daniel saw something else forming, slower and heavier. Relief. The kind people were ashamed to admit out loud. A middle-aged man stepped forward, late 50s, shoulders rounded by years of lifting things that should have been lifted by machines. His face was tight, jaw clenched like it was holding something back. "You think a check fixes this?" he said. His voice carried, but it wasn't a shout. It was worse. It was tired. Daniel met his gaze. "No," he said. "I think it buys time. Time to heal. Time to choose something that doesn't cost you fingers." The man snorted. "Easy to say when you don't work here." Daniel nodded. "I did," he said. "A long time ago. Different plant, same promises." That gave the man pause. Not trust, not forgiveness. But pause mattered. A woman near the back pushed through, her hair pulled into a tight bun, eyes sharp. "My husband died here," she said. The crowd shifted. The air tightened again. 6 years ago. They called it an accident. Daniel's throat tightened. He did not look away. "I know," he said. "I read the report. The original one, not the one they filed." Her breath hitched. And? And it was a lie. That word landed harder than any speech could have. A murmur rippled through the group, low and dangerous. Names were exchanged in glances. Memories surfaced, unwanted but undeniable. Daniel raised his voice slightly, not to command, to be heard. "There will be hearings," he said. "There will be investigations that don't end with paperwork. I can't promise justice feels like justice, but I can promise this doesn't disappear." The woman stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, sharp, decisive. She stepped back into the crowd. The sedan door opened behind Daniel. The driver waited, eyes scanning the perimeter. Daniel hesitated, then turned back toward the group. "You'll receive details by morning," he said, "about compensation, about counseling, about next steps." He paused. "Take tonight. You've earned it." He got into the car. The door closed. The engine started. As they pulled away, Daniel watched the plant recede in the rear window. A monument to negligence, now quiet. The driver merged onto the road without comment. Minutes passed, then miles. The city thinned. Daniel leaned his head back, closed his eyes. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind the familiar ache. The cost that never showed up on balance sheets. His phone vibrated. One message, then another, then 3 at once. Board members, investors, public relations, the machine waking up elsewhere. He ignored them, for now. The hotel was downtown, glass and steel, polished to a mirror shine. Daniel checked in under his own name, no alias, no ceremony. The clerk recognized it. Of course she did. Her smile flickered, professional but strained. "Your room is ready, Mr. Mercer." Upstairs, the suite was quiet, impersonal. Daniel dropped his briefcase by the door and loosened his tie. He poured himself a glass of water and stood by the window, looking down at the city. Sirens, laughter, life continuing in parallel lanes. A knock came at the door. Soft, then firmer. Daniel frowned. He had told no one where he was staying. He opened it to find Victor Hale standing in the hallway. Victor looked worse than he had on the plane. Jacket wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. A man who had not slept since the truth landed. "I figured you'd be here," Victor said. No greeting, no apology. Daniel stepped aside. "You have 5 minutes." Victor entered, pacing immediately. "You blindsided us," he said. "The stock dipped 5% in an hour. Analysts are circling." Daniel closed the door. "Sit," he said. Victor did not. "You didn't have to do it like that," he pressed. "There were other options, gradual shutdown, quiet restructuring." Daniel walked to the window. "Quiet is how people get hurt," he said. Victor stopped pacing. "You think this makes you righteous?" Daniel turned. His expression was calm, but there was steel underneath. "I think it makes me accountable." Victor's voice dropped. You're going to burn bridges. Daniel nodded. Yes. Victor laughed bitterly. You enjoy this? Playing executioner? Daniel stepped closer, not aggressively, deliberately. You sat on those boards, he said. You signed off on budgets that deferred repairs. You told yourself it was temporary. Victor looked away. That's business. No, Daniel said. That's cowardice with a spreadsheet. The word hit. Victor flinched. You're not clean either, he snapped. You built this company. Daniel did not deny it. That's why I'm tearing part of it down, he said. You don't get to disown what you created. You fix it. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Victor's shoulders sagged. They're coming for you, he said quietly. Media, regulators, politicians who liked the donations. Daniel smiled faintly. They already are. Victor studied him, really seeing him now. What happens next? Daniel picked up his briefcase and opened it. Inside were documents Victor had not yet seen. Names, dates, signatures. Next, Daniel said, we tell the truth. Victor's eyes widened. That will take down half the sector. Daniel closed the briefcase. Then half the sector should be worried. Victor exhaled slowly. You're serious. I've never been more serious. Victor nodded once. Then I need a drink, he said, turning toward the door. Daniel watched him leave. The door clicked shut. Daniel stood alone again, the city humming beyond the glass. He sat on the edge of the bed and finally checked his phone. Missed calls, dozens. A single voicemail from his general counsel. Her voice was tight but steady. Daniel, the Department of Labor is requesting a meeting. Tomorrow morning. This is bigger than we thought. Daniel leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Bigger was fine. Bigger meant it could not be buried. Outside, the city lights flickered on fully. Somewhere, a news producer was writing a headline. Somewhere else, a worker was telling their family they would be home early for the first time in years. Daniel closed his eyes. The weight settled again. Heavy. Necessary. Morning arrived without permission. Grey light seeped through the gaps in the curtains, flattening the city into a dull geometry of glass and concrete. Daniel Mercer was already awake, sitting at the small desk by the window, jacket on, tie loosened, coffee untouched and cooling beside his hand. He had slept less than 2 hours. It had been enough. His phone buzzed again. Not a call this time. A calendar alert he had placed years ago and never once ignored. Department of Labor, 8:30, Federal Building, downtown. Daniel stood, rolled his shoulders once, and looked at his reflection in the darkened glass. The man staring back looked older than he had the day before. Not weaker, sharper. There was a difference. He straightened his tie, picked up the briefcase, and left the room without looking back. The Federal Building was a relic of another era. Stone columns, bronze doors worn smooth by generations of hands that had come seeking permission, protection, or absolution. Security was efficient, impersonal. His name opened paths without comment now. That was the other cost of revelation. Anonymity did not survive it. In a windowless conference room on the 6th floor, 3 people waited. 2 men, 1 woman. All career, all careful. Files stacked neatly in front of them like shields. Mr. Mercer, said the woman, late 40s, precise posture, voice trained to carry authority without warmth. I'm Deputy Secretary Elaine Porter. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Daniel sat, placed the briefcase at his feet. I assumed you'd call, he said. I'm surprised it took this long. One of the men shifted, uncomfortable. Elaine Porter's eyes flicked to him, then back to Daniel. "We're here because the closure you ordered yesterday triggered multiple jurisdictional alarms," she said. "Worker safety, environmental compliance, labor reporting, and corporate disclosure." Daniel nodded. "Good." That threw her off balance, just slightly. "You understand," she continued, "that unilateral action of this scale raises concerns. Due process, economic impact, the appearance of protecting shareholders over people," Daniel finished calmly. "I'm familiar with the language." Elaine's lips pressed together. "This is not a courtroom." "No," Daniel said. "It's where courtrooms begin." He reached down, opened the briefcase, and slid a thin stack of documents across the table. Not dramatically, precisely. The room changed when they saw the first page. Incident logs, medical reports, internal emails, time-stamped, cross-referenced. The second man leaned forward. The first page led to the second, then the third. Elaine did not touch the papers at first. She looked at Daniel instead. "You've been collecting this for how long?" "Long enough to know who buried what," Daniel replied, "and who was told to look away." One of the men cleared his throat. "These documents suggest criminal negligence," he said quietly. "They demonstrate it," Daniel said, repeatedly. Elaine finally picked up the stack. Her fingers tightened slightly. "Why bring this to us now?" Daniel's gaze did not waver. "Because if I didn't, someone else would. And they wouldn't care who got burned in the process." Silence followed. Not resistance. Calculation. Elaine exhaled slowly. "This implicates more than one facility." Daniel nodded. 7. Possibly 9. The second man swore under his breath. "That's an industry-wide problem." "That's why it survived," Daniel said. Elaine closed the file. "You understand what happens next?" Daniel leaned back. Investigations, subpoenas, hearings, press conferences that say nothing and mean less. And eventually, consequences that arrive too late for some people. Her eyes sharpened. "And your role in this?" Daniel paused, just long enough. "I cooperate," he said, "fully." Elaine studied him. "You're placing yourself in the blast radius." Daniel gave a small, humorless smile. "I built the radius." Another silence, heavier this time. "Very well," Elaine said finally. "We will open a formal inquiry, effective immediately." Daniel stood. "Then I'll expect your call." Outside, the air felt different. Thinner. Charged. News vans already lined the curb across the street. Reporters lingered like birds waiting for something to fall. Daniel walked past them without slowing. A voice called out, "Mr. Mercer, is it true you're shutting down half your operations?" Another, "Are these allegations accurate?" Another, louder, "Did people die because of decisions you made?" Daniel stopped. He turned. The movement was small but decisive. Cameras surged forward. "Yes," he said clearly. The single word cut through the noise. The shouting faltered. "Yes," he repeated. "People were hurt because of decisions made in my company. That's why those decisions are ending." Someone tried to shout another question. Daniel raised a hand. The crowd stilled, surprised by the instinctive authority in the gesture. "This is not about optics," he said. "It's about responsibility. If you want answers, you'll get them, in the open." He turned away again. This time, no one followed. Back at the hotel, Daniel found the voicemail he had been expecting, his general counsel. "We have a problem," she said. "Victor Hale has gone quiet. He resigned from 3 boards overnight, and there's chatter he's talking to someone we didn't anticipate." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "Who?" The press, she said, and possibly the Justice Department. Daniel hung up and sat on the edge of the bed. Victor's face rose unbidden in his mind. The fear, the bitterness, the relief of handing off guilt. The door knocked, harder this time. Daniel opened it to find a young woman in a plain blazer, hair pulled back, eyes alert. She held up a badge. "Mr. Mercer," she said. "Special Agent Rachel Collins, Department of Justice. We'd like a word." Daniel stepped aside. "Of course," he said. She entered, scanning the room. "This won't take long." He closed the door behind her. "It rarely does," he replied. She sat. He remained standing. "Victor Hale contacted us this morning," she said. "He's offering cooperation. He claims you orchestrated the shutdown to control the narrative." Daniel considered that. Victor is trying to save himself. Rachel nodded. "That's usually how it starts." She studied him closely. "Why not let us handle this from the beginning?" Daniel looked out the window, down at the city moving below, oblivious. "Because systems protect themselves," he said. "People don't." Rachel leaned back. "You realize this could end with charges?" Daniel turned back to her. His expression was calm, resolved. "Then it ends honestly." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she stood. "We'll be in touch." After she left, Daniel remained where he was, alone again. The city outside kept moving. Somewhere, someone was printing a headline, but would never fully capture what was happening. Somewhere else, a worker was deciding whether to trust the future. Daniel picked up his phone and typed a single message to his team. "Release everything." He set the phone down, sat, and waited. The storm had not peaked yet, but it was coming. The documents went live at noon. Not quietly, not strategically leaked. Released. All of them. Emails, memos, safety audits with redacted conclusions restored. Names attached to decisions that had once been buried under committee language and legal fog. By 12:15, Daniel Mercer's phone became useless, vibrating itself into silence, the screen lighting up and going dark in frantic cycles until the battery warning flashed like a pulse. He did not answer. He sat in the hotel lounge instead, a space designed to feel calm without ever being personal. Leather chairs, neutral art, a television mounted high on the wall, muted but impossible to ignore. He watched the ticker crawl along the bottom of the screen, numbers bleeding red. North Shore Industrial Group down 11%, then 13, then 15. Analysts speaking with the urgent confidence of people who had never set foot in a factory. The anchor's lips moved. Daniel already knew the words. A bartender approached cautiously, polishing a glass that was already clean. "Can I get you anything, sir?" Daniel shook his head. "I'm working." The bartender glanced at the television, recognition dawning too late. "Right," he murmured, retreating. Across the room, a man in his early 70s lowered his newspaper. Vietnam veteran by the hat. The man studied Daniel for a long moment, then raised his coffee cup slightly. Not approval. Acknowledgement. Daniel returned the gesture without smiling. His phone buzzed again, this time cutting through the chaos with a different tone, a secure line. He answered. "They're calling an emergency hearing," Elaine Porter said without preamble. "Tomorrow morning, Senate Labor Committee. You're invited." Daniel exhaled slowly. Subpoena or courtesy? "Courtesy," she said. "For now. That won't last." "No," Elaine agreed. "It won't." The call ended. Daniel set the phone face down on the table. Around him, conversations shifted, voices dropping when his name appeared on the television again. He felt the familiar sensation of being both visible and alone, a condition power never prepared anyone for. By late afternoon, the first lawsuit was filed, then the second. By evening, there were more than Daniel could count. Class actions, shareholder suits, a criminal referral quietly docketed somewhere deep in the Justice Department's machinery. At 6:40 in the evening, Victor Hale appeared on the screen. Daniel stiffened. Victor sat in a studio chair, lights harsh, makeup failing to hide the tremor in his jaw. The chyron beneath his face read, "Former board member, North Shore Industrial Group." Former. That had been quick. Victor spoke with practiced regret. Words like culture and oversight and systemic failure rolled off his tongue, carefully arranged to point everywhere but inward. When asked about Daniel Mercer, Victor paused just long enough to suggest gravity. Daniel was singular, Victor said. Brilliant, intense. But sometimes that intensity crossed into recklessness. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. There it was, the pivot. The anchor leaned in. Are you suggesting this was his decision alone? Victor hesitated again, longer this time. I'm saying the board was not fully informed. A lie. A clean one, the kind that survived first contact. Daniel opened his eyes as the screen cut to commercial. His reflection stared back at him from the black glass. Older, tired, unmoved. He stood and left the lounge. Back in his room, the city outside had shifted into evening. Lights on, windows glowing like small islands. Daniel loosened his tie and sat at the desk again. He pulled out a legal pad, blank. He had not used one in years. He wrote slowly, deliberately. Names, dates, meetings Victor had attended, votes he had cast, emails he had sent after midnight with the subject line, revised numbers. Daniel tore the page free and fed it through the scanner on his phone, sending it to a single contact. Special Agent Rachel Collins replied within seconds. Received. The knock came at 9:10. Daniel did not jump this time. He expected it. He opened the door to find Helen Brooks standing in the hallway, the woman from the plane. She looked smaller without the context of the crowd, her posture careful, but her eyes were the same. Sharp, unafraid. I hope this isn't inappropriate, she said. The front desk wouldn't give me your room number. I waited. Daniel stepped aside. Come in. She entered, glancing around once before sitting in the chair opposite the desk. I watched the news, she said. All of it. I imagined you would. Helen folded her hands in her lap. Victor Hale is lying. Yes. He's not very good at it. Daniel smiled faintly. He's been protected too long. Helen nodded. I spent 30 years in a courthouse, she said. I recognize the moment when someone thinks proximity will save them. She leaned forward. They're going to try to make you the villain. Daniel did not answer immediately. He looked past her, out at the city. They already are. Helen studied him. You seem prepared for that. I am, he said. What I'm not prepared for is silence. She raised an eyebrow. Silence? From the people who knew, Daniel said. From the ones who signed and nodded and told themselves it wasn't their problem. Helen stood. They won't stay silent, she said. Not now. Daniel looked up at her. Why are you here? She considered the question. Because my husband worked in a place like that plant, she said. Different state, different year, same excuses. Her voice wavered just once. No one ever stood up then. Daniel absorbed that. I'm sorry. She shook her head. Don't be. Just don't stop. They held each other's gaze for a long moment. Then Helen turned and left without another word. Daniel sat alone again. At 11:30, his general counsel called. Her voice was strained but controlled. The board is moving to suspend you, she said. Temporary. They're framing it as fiduciary caution. Daniel closed his eyes. Of course they are. You'll be stripped of operational authority by morning. That's fine. There was a pause on the line. Daniel, she said quietly, this could cost you everything. He opened his eyes. It already has, he replied. That's how I know it's real. The call ended. Daniel lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. His body ached now, the delayed toll of days compressed into hours. Somewhere below, traffic moved. Somewhere above, decisions were being made without him. He did not feel regret. At 2:14 in the morning, his phone lit up one last time. A message from an unknown number. You should have stayed quiet. Daniel read it once, then deleted it. He turned the phone face down, closed his eyes, and let the darkness come. Not as escape, as preparation. Tomorrow, the storm would have a face. The hearing room smelled faintly of old wood and fresh paper, a contradiction that felt appropriate. Daniel Mercer sat alone at the long table, hands folded, jacket buttoned, back straight. Cameras lined the rear wall like silent witnesses. Senators whispered to aides. Staffers moved with rehearsed urgency. The storm he had been waiting for had finally chosen a shape. The chairwoman entered last. Senator Ruth Caldwell, late 60s, iron-gray hair pulled back, reputation carved over decades. She did not look at Daniel as she took her seat. She studied the room first, the way someone does when they intend to control it. This hearing of the Senate Labor Committee will come to order, she said. The gavel struck once. The sound echoed longer than it should have. Daniel lifted his eyes. He did not scan the room. He did not look for allies. He looked straight ahead, as if the future were sitting there waiting to be addressed. Opening statements blurred past him. Words like accountability, transparency, economic stability. He had heard them all before. They were the language of distance, useful, incomplete. Mr. Mercer, Senator Caldwell said at last, her voice cool. You authorized the immediate shutdown of a major industrial facility without prior consultation with federal regulators. Do you deny that? No, Daniel said. A ripple moved through the room. Cameras leaned in. And you did so knowing it would trigger mass layoffs and market instability. Yes. Senator Caldwell raised an eyebrow. Then perhaps you'd like to explain why you believe you are above the law. Daniel inhaled slowly. When he spoke, his voice was steady, unadorned. I don't, he said. That's why I'm here. A few senators shifted. One smiled thinly, waiting. You could have reported these concerns through established channels, another senator interjected. Why didn't you? Daniel turned his head slightly. Because those channels were already compromised. Strong accusation, the senator said. It's a documented one, Daniel replied. He reached into his briefcase and placed a single document on the table. A photograph, grainy. A machine press, blood on the floor. No faces visible, just evidence. This worker was injured 8 months before the shutdown, Daniel said. The incident was classified as operator error. The safety guard had been reported faulty 6 times prior. Silence followed. Not shocked, uneasy. Senator Caldwell leaned forward. You're turning this into theater. Daniel met her gaze. No, he said. I'm refusing to sanitize it. A murmur rose in the gallery. A woman wiped her eyes. Someone else leaned back, arms crossed, defensive. Let's talk about motive, a younger senator said, eager. Your critics suggest this was a calculated move. Control the narrative, eliminate liability. Daniel nodded. They're half right. The senator smiled. Which half? I controlled the timing, Daniel said, not the truth. That smile faded. From the back of the room, a familiar face watched. Victor Hale sat 2 rows behind the press, posture stiff, jaw clenched. He had not been announced. He had not been invited. But he was there, drawn by fear and unfinished business. Daniel saw him, did not acknowledge him. Mr. Mercer, Senator Caldwell said again, you've presented yourself as a reformer, yet you built the very system you now condemn. Why should we believe you? Daniel paused. This time it was deliberate. Because I'm not asking you to absolve me, he said. I'm asking you to stop me if I'm wrong. That landed harder than any defense. The chairwoman studied him. And if you're right? Then you'll have to admit, Daniel said, that the problem isn't one company. It's how many people learned to benefit from looking away. A beat, then another. Call the next witness, Senator Caldwell said sharply. Rachel Collins took the seat beside Daniel moments later, badge visible, expression unreadable. She raised her hand and swore in without hesitation. Her testimony was precise, controlled, emails traced, financial incentives mapped, patterns established. She did not dramatize. She did not editorialize. She let the structure speak for itself. When she finished, the room felt smaller. Senator Caldwell rubbed her temple. Mr. Hale, she said suddenly, since you're present, would you care to join us? Victor stiffened. Cameras swung. He hesitated, then stood, smoothing his jacket with trembling hands. He took the seat Daniel had vacated briefly, his movements awkward, unsure. Mr. Hale, the chairwoman said, did you authorize deferred maintenance at the San Diego facility? Victor glanced at Daniel, then at the cameras. I acted on information provided to me, he said. I trusted the operational reports. Reports you signed, Rachel interjected calmly. Victor's mouth tightened. Based on assurances. Assurances you requested, Rachel said, after cost projections exceeded thresholds you personally set. Victor's face flushed. This is a witch hunt. Daniel leaned forward. His voice was quiet, but it carried. No, he said. It's an audit. Victor turned toward him, anger breaking through fear. You think this makes you better than me? Daniel looked at him steadily. No, he said. I think it makes me responsible. That was the moment. The one no camera could fully capture. Victor laughed, sharp and hollow. You're burning the house down because you don't want to live with what you built? Daniel did not flinch. I'm opening the doors, he said. The fire was already inside. Senator Caldwell struck the gavel. Enough! She looked tired now, not defeated, worn. This committee will recess, she said, pending further investigation. The gavel fell again. Final. As the room erupted into motion, Daniel remained seated. He felt the adrenaline ebb, leaving clarity behind. Rachel gathered her files. You did what you said you would, she murmured. For now, Daniel replied. Outside, reporters surged, microphones thrust forward, questions shouted. Daniel stopped once, just once. This isn't about me, he said. It never was. Then he walked on. Victor did not follow. That night, alone again, Daniel stood by his hotel window, city lights blurred by rain that had started without warning. His phone vibrated with a single message from an unknown number. You've made enemies you won't see coming. Daniel read it, then set the phone down. He watched the rain trace lines down the glass, each one merging into another, impossible to follow to its source. Somewhere below, sirens wailed. Somewhere else, a decision was being unmade. For the first time since this began, Daniel allowed himself a small, quiet breath. The system was awake now, and it was watching him back. The fallout did not wait for morning. It never did. By dawn, Daniel Mercer's name had become a fault line. News panels split cleanly down the middle. One side called him reckless, the other called him necessary. No one called him lucky. Outside the hotel, rain slicked the pavement, headlights smearing into white scars that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Daniel watched it from above, coffee warming his hands, untouched again. His phone rang on a secure line he had not shared. Conclusion, but tight. Search warrants were approved overnight. 3 facilities, 2 board members' homes, Victor Hale's included. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Did he cooperate? Yes, Rachel said, too eagerly. He handed over devices, emails, even personal notes. He's trying to trade volume for immunity. And it won't work the way he thinks. Daniel opened his eyes. Good. There was a pause. You should know something else, Rachel continued. The Attorney General wants you in Washington. Not as a witness, as a subject. Daniel absorbed that without visible reaction. When? Tonight. They're sending a car. Of course they are. After the call ended, Daniel finally drank the coffee. It tasted burnt and thin. Appropriate. The car arrived just after 8 in the morning. Dark, unmarked. The driver did not introduce himself. He didn't need to. They drove north in silence, the city peeling away into long stretches of asphalt and scrub. Daniel watched the landscape change. Each mile a quiet confirmation that there was no reversing what had been set in motion. In Washington, the building they took him to was not the one people recognized from television. No marble steps, no cameras. Just concrete, glass, and hallways designed to discourage lingering. Inside, the air was cool and dry, stripped of personality. They placed him in a room with no windows and one long table. 2 chairs on one side, one on the other. He waited. When the door opened, Elaine Porter entered with another woman Daniel did not recognize. Younger, sharper, hair pulled back with intent. The kind of person who did not bluff because she did not need to. Mr. Mercer, Elaine said, taking a seat. This is Assistant Attorney General Nora Klein. Daniel nodded. Miss Klein? Nora did not return the nod. She studied him as if he were a document she had already read twice. You understand why you're here, she said. Yes. Then let's skip the pageantry, Nora said. Your actions triggered a cascade. Some of it justified, some of it destabilizing. Daniel leaned back slightly. Stability built on harm isn't stability. Nora's eyes flicked to Elaine, then back. You're not wrong, but you're also not the law. Daniel smiled faintly. Neither are corporations. Elaine interjected gently. Daniel, the concern is not what you revealed. It's how. Daniel's gaze returned to her. If I had followed protocol, we wouldn't be sitting here. Nora folded her hands. Perhaps, but now we are. And now the question is— Those were not part of my disclosure. No, Nora agreed. They weren't. Elaine's brow furrowed. Where did these come from? Nora turned back toward Daniel. Victor Hale wasn't the only one talking. Daniel felt something tighten, just slightly. Who else? Someone closer, Nora said. Someone still inside your company. The room cooled another degree. You're bleeding, Nora continued, and you knew you would. The question is whether you anticipated how far. Daniel exhaled slowly. I anticipated resistance. This isn't resistance, Nora said. This is a counteroffensive. She tapped the screen. The emails shifted. A thread marked confidential Keep the machinery running without you. Daniel absorbed that. He nodded once. Then they misunderstand what I started. Nora studied him. Explain. Daniel leaned forward. I didn't just release documents, he said. I released context. And I gave it to people who know how to read it. Elaine looked up. Who? Daniel met her gaze. The workers. The regulators who've been waiting for cover. The journalists who stopped trusting press releases years ago. Nora smiled thinly. You're betting on momentum. I'm betting on sunlight, Daniel replied. The door opened again. Rachel Collins stepped in, holding a folder. Her expression told Daniel everything before she spoke. We have confirmation, she said. The emails came from a board member still active, one who publicly supported Daniel. Elaine closed her eyes. Jesus. Nora's jaw tightened. Names. Rachel slid the folder across the table. Daniel did not reach for it. He already knew. The name had been forming in his mind since the first message, the first hesitation that felt out of place. Marcus Bell, Elaine whispered. He was with us at the beginning. He stayed for the middle, Rachel said. But not the end. Silence settled again, heavier now. Nora looked at Daniel. You're facing two paths, she said. One where you cooperate quietly and let us handle this. Another where you go public again and blow what's left wide open. Daniel thought of the plant, the woman with the bandaged arm, Helen Brooks, Victor Hale's hollow smile, the workers who had finally slept a full night. I don't choose quietly, he said. Nora nodded once. I didn't think you would. She closed the folder. Then we move fast. And you understand something, she added. From this point forward, you're not just a whistleblower. You're a target. Daniel stood. I was the moment I stood up. Nora extended her hand. After a beat, Daniel took it. Outside, Washington buzzed with its usual confidence, unaware of the cracks spreading beneath it. Daniel stepped into the afternoon light, the city pressing in from all sides. His phone vibrated again. A single message, from a blocked number. We tried to stop you. Now we stop you differently. Daniel did not reply. He slid the phone back into his pocket and kept walking. The next move would not belong to him alone. And that, for the first time since this began, gave him something like hope. The first leak landed at 3:17 in the afternoon. Not on a major network, not from a press conference. It appeared on a regional investigative site run by two former reporters who had been laid off a decade earlier and never stopped digging. The headline was blunt, almost inelegant. Internal emails show coordinated effort to undermine safety inquiry at North Shore Industrial. Daniel Mercer was in a quiet office borrowed from the Department of Labor when his phone vibrated. Rachel Collins stood by the window, arms crossed, watching Washington traffic inch along like a patient animal. It's begun, she said, without looking back. Daniel read the article slowly, line by line. He recognized the tone immediately. Careful, precise, no speculation, just documents, timestamps, and context that made excuses impossible. Who gave them this? Daniel asked. Rachel turned. Marcus Bell didn't move alone. That answer carried weight. Within an hour, the story jumped. Local radio, then national wire services. By 5 o'clock, it had reached the evening news cycle. Daniel watched his own face appear on screens in waiting rooms and offices across the city, frozen mid-expression, a convenient stand-in for a far larger problem. The narrative was shifting, not toward forgiveness, toward inevitability. At 6:10, Helen Brooks called. Daniel answered immediately. They're talking about you like you're already gone, she said. Her voice was calm, but there was iron beneath it. That's usually when things get dangerous. I know, Daniel replied. I've seen this before, Helen continued. When institutions realize they can't win, they try to exhaust. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. I don't plan to outlast them, he said. I plan to outnumber them. Helen was quiet. Staffers moved faster than usual. Doors opened and closed without ceremony. Somewhere deep inside, decisions were being rearranged in real time. They were ushered into a small conference room, just as Marcus Bell was led out of another. Marcus looked older than Daniel remembered, not in years, in posture. His shoulders sagged, the confidence that once came so easily to him, now fractured by the weight of exposure. When he saw Daniel, he froze. Daniel, Marcus said, forcing a smile that failed to hold. I hoped we'd talk privately. Daniel studied him. 30 years of shared decisions passed between them in a second. You already chose who to talk to, Daniel said. Marcus's jaw tightened. You don't understand the pressure. Daniel tilted his head. I understand it perfectly. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. This went too far. You could have contained it. We could have fixed things internally. We did, Daniel said. You fixed them on paper. Marcus's eyes flashed. You're destroying the company. Daniel leaned in slightly. No, he said. You are. I'm just refusing to lie about it. Rachel cleared her throat. Gentlemen, she said evenly, this conversation is no longer hypothetical. Marcus exhaled sharply. You think they'll protect you? He asked Daniel. Once this is over? Daniel straightened. I don't need protection. Marcus laughed bitterly. That's what you think. He was led away before Daniel could respond. That night, the second wave hit. A coordinated media push. Opinion pieces questioning Daniel's mental stability. Anonymous sources describing him as erratic, obsessive, dangerous to economic confidence. The language was familiar. Daniel had seen it used before, always when facts could no longer be denied. Rachel threw her phone onto the table in frustration. They're using the same playbook everywhere. Because it works, Daniel said. Until it doesn't. At 9:40, an unexpected email arrived. Subject line, Sworn Statement. Sender, Helen Brooks. Daniel opened it. The statement was precise, detailed. Dates, names, patterns she had observed over decades in courtrooms and depositions. She did not speculate. She testified. As a citizen, as a witness, as someone with nothing left to gain. Rachel read over his shoulder. This changes things, she said quietly. It's not just her, Daniel replied. Others will follow. How do you know? Daniel looked up. Because silence is heavier than risk, and people get tired of carrying it. At 10:15, the Department of Justice announced a formal expansion of the inquiry. New language, broader scope. Marcus Bell's name was mentioned once, Victor Hale's twice. The market reacted violently. Shares plunged further. Board members issued statements that contradicted each other within minutes. The illusion of coordination shattered. Daniel sat back in his chair. For the first time in days, he felt something close to stillness. Rachel watched him carefully. This isn't over, she said. I know, Daniel replied, but it's past the point of reversal. Outside, rain finally fell, heavy and insistent, washing the city in streaks of light and shadow. Sirens echoed distantly. Somewhere, a producer rewrote a headline for the 4th time that night. Daniel's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. You don't get to decide how this ends. Daniel typed back one line. Neither do you. He set the phone down and looked at Rachel. Tomorrow, he said, they'll try something else. Rachel nodded. So will we. Daniel stood and buttoned his jacket. The fabric felt heavier now. Earned. As he stepped into the hallway, Daniel understood something with sudden clarity. This was no longer about one company, or one plant, or even one man. It was about whether truth could survive coordination. He walked forward anyway. Because some systems only change when someone is willing to stand where the pressure converges and The final collapse did not arrive with sirens or subpoenas. It arrived with resignation letters. They came in waves, staggered across the morning like controlled detonations. First, Marcus Bell, citing health reasons and a desire to cooperate fully. Then 2 senior compliance officers, quietly escorted out of headquarters before lunch. By mid-afternoon, the board announced an emergency restructuring committee, a phrase so hollow it barely registered anymore. Daniel Mercer watched it unfold from a modest conference room inside a federal building, hands folded, expression unreadable, the noise of consequence finally overtaking the noise of denial. Outside, the city moved as it always did. Traffic, coffee lines, people late for meetings that suddenly felt smaller. Inside, the machinery of accountability ground forward with no regard for reputation. Rachel Collins stood near the wall, reading updates from her tablet, jaw set, eyes sharp. She had slept 4 hours. It showed. She did not slow down. They're done protecting each other, she said finally. Too many people talking, too many records now in the open. Daniel nodded once. They always fractured the same point, he said, when silence costs more than truth. Across the table, Assistant Attorney General Nora Klein closed a folder and exhaled. The indictments will be unsealed tomorrow morning, she said. Multiple counts, conspiracy, fraud, willful endangerment. We're not negotiating this down. Daniel did not react. He had already moved past victory. Victory implied an end. This felt more like a reckoning. You understand, Nora continued. This will permanently alter your standing. You won't be returning to your role. Daniel met her gaze. I didn't expect to. There was a brief pause, then something like respect crossed her face. Most people try to bargain at this stage. Daniel's mouth curved into a faint, tired smile. I already paid. When the meeting ended, Daniel stepped outside alone. The air was cooler than it had been all week, the kind of clarity that followed storms. Across the street, a small group of reporters waited behind temporary barriers, murmuring to one another, cameras hanging idle. They noticed him immediately. A ripple of movement, microphones lifted. Daniel stopped. Not because he had to, because he chose to. This ends today, he said, voice carrying without effort. Not because of me, but because people decided not to look away anymore. No grand statements, no slogans. Just that. He turned and walked on. No one followed. That evening he returned to his hotel room one last time. The space looked unchanged. Same chair, same window, same city stretching outward in grids of light. But the weight in the air had shifted. Daniel packed slowly, deliberately. He left the tie behind. The briefcase remained. Some tools you did not discard. A knock came at the door, softer than before. Hello Brooks stood in the hallway, coat folded over her arm, eyes steady. I wanted to say goodbye, she said. Daniel stepped aside. You didn't have to. I know, she replied. She glanced around the room. They'll write books about this, she said. They'll argue over motives. They always do. Helen smiled faintly. For what it's worth, you reminded a lot of people what courage looks like when it isn't loud. Daniel felt something tighten, then ease. Thank you, he said. It was enough. She reached into her bag and handed him a folded sheet of paper. "Names," she said. "People who called me after the statement went public. Judges, clerks, workers. They want to help the next time something like this starts." Daniel took it, did not open it yet. "The next time will come," he said. Helen nodded. "It always does." After she left, Daniel stood by the window for a long time. He thought of the plant, now silent, of the workers who would find new paths, some harder than others, but safer, of Victor Hale, Marcus Bell, men who had mistaken proximity for immunity, of the system, wounded but awake. His phone buzzed, a final message from Rachel. "They're moving forward. You did your part." Daniel typed back a single line. "We all did." At dawn, he boarded a quiet flight heading east. No escort, no special treatment. Just a seat, a window, and the low hum of engines pulling him toward whatever came next. As the plane lifted, the city receded, no longer a battleground, just another place where choices had finally been made. Daniel closed his eyes, not to rest, but to mark the moment. This was not redemption. It was resolution. The kind earned slowly, painfully, and without guarantees. If this story of accountability, courage, and consequence resonated with you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment the words, "Stand for Truth."